Hello, happy Tuesday. Welcome back to another episode of The Practice. This show is an unrehearsed, unedited look into my digital art workflow. I'm Stuart. I'm a 3D artist, illustrator, animator, graphic designer, and your friend. And I'm excited, as always, to get into another episode this week of creating an original piece over the course of the next hour or two. So, thank you all for tuning in. And I'm pumped up, as always, to get into this with you. So, this week, I think we're going to depart a little bit from the normal routine, and instead of creating, a full-on scene, full-on landscape like we've been doing recently, I'm going to pull it back and just focus on a little character design. In terms of little character, I'm thinking, some sort of beetle, some sort of insect. And I've got a whole bunch of reference imagery pulled up here. I think we can borrow and choose from a lot of these different creatures and come up with something original and unique and fun. And I think it's the type of thing we can create a lot of variations on and create a whole range of different insect character designs based on a few sort of base parts, right? So, so there we have it. Exciting stuff. I was a little bit inspired by a camping trip this weekend. I saw a bunch of these huge beetles in the snow. So I think it's appropriate to draw on that inspiration, and I think it's going to be a fun one. So let's get started. Let's start modeling. And as we're getting going here, like I say every week, these shows are best when folks are in the chat saying what's up, asking questions, sharing thoughts, showing what they're working on. We do little segments in the show where folks just drop a link to a project or a piece that they're working on, and they can get some feedback or a couple more eyes on their project, just share it out with the world and continue growing the community and getting more eyes on their work. So please, if you want, if you got anything to share, look it up. Let us know. All right, so let's see here. I think we'll start with some of the real basics, right? Before we get into texturing and doing a bunch of variation and adding the legs. So I'm going to start just fleshing this stuff out. So now we're working on the, I guess the carapace. What do you call this? The abdomen, the main body segment of the beetle. Just giving it a little bit of taper on one end. Now I just selected and removed half of this carapace, made a duplicate. I'm going to use that to make the wings. So just going to create a null and throw that all in a symmetry, which is pointing the wrong way. Just that. So a fairly basic roughed out shape. So now let's start introducing some legs. Let's see how many segments these guys typically have. 1, 2, 3, really. Or 1, 2, 3. Hey, left hand. Thank you. Appreciate you joining in. Making a little insect this week. Or a big insect, perhaps, like a beetle. Just getting started here, too. So it's interesting to be on the other side of 50 episodes. 51 is what we're working on now. Last week was a pretty big week, a bit of a milestone. Hit the half century mark, the 50th episode. I felt like it went together pretty nicely. We introduced the theme song, the intro music for the first time, which was really exciting for me. Felt like it upped production values a hair. Um, I also was pleased with the way that the piece came out that we worked on. So overall, it was a pretty cool session. And I'll have to apologize. Please forgive me if I'm a little slower or more brain dead than usual this week. I actually just last night got back from a really exhausting 3-night backpacking trip up Mount Whitney. So it's funny. This is where I'm sort of drawing some of my inspiration from because weirdly, at the top of Mount Whitney, which is covered in snow still at this time of year, there's like these enormous black beetles just like hanging out in the snow, which is strange to me because I didn't think that beetles would be at that elevation. I certainly didn't think that there would be so many enormous ones just like hanging out in, feet and feet of snow, like deep snowbanks. So that was interesting to me. And I decided to work on a similar beetle this week on the practice. Had that idea on the way up yesterday, actually. So that's why my beard is untrimmed and I'm slightly sunburnt, a little bit tired, and probably not quite my chipper self. Maybe a little less articulate than usual as well. Well, that's all right. And that's kind of what we call the show the practice, right? So you're gonna be fresher some weeks than others. You're gonna have a better headspace some week than others. But if you want to keep progressing the work, if you want to keep improving your skills, you got to keep making stuff anyway, right? Life's not going to be perfect. There's going to be different opportunities, different setbacks, but it's important to keep your creative practice alive and well. And so, regardless of my, I guess, appetite for it this morning, we're doing it anyways. That's how we roll. This will be one of these episodes where we use the symmetry object a ton. Super useful for stuff like this, obviously. Symmetrical things like characters are made much easier with this symmetry tool, obviously. Hmm. Thinking about the best way to make these pincers. And with, modeling, with creating digital things, there's really always more than one way to skin a cat. I'm just sort of thinking about the best way to make these. And I think a sphere might do the trick, actually. Maybe a half a sphere. Let's give this a shot. All right, so there's the basics. What we can do is, what are we? Close that polygon hole. Thanks, left hand. Appreciate it. Yeah, I was really psyched about how that 50 landscape came out. And landscapes are some of my favorites. They really are. What if that's, I think part of that comes from my love of really getting outside. I really like camping and hiking and enjoying nature and even just going for a quick walk in the park, stuff like that. But I think it's just a great counterpoint to, I guess, digital art. I spend so much time with my computer and my laptop. It's really great to get outside for a weekend and get away from it all and spend some time around a campfire or, sitting in the dirt, shooting the shit with your friends and having a good time. Well, that looks pretty terrible. Ouch. Yikes. And these beetles are really, really cool. I believe beetles are like some of the most plentiful species on the planet. They're just everywhere. And an enormous percentage of the bugs on the planet alive today are beetles. And they come in just an incredible variety of shapes and sizes. What might be fun one day is to like, just take a base model like this and just make a whole bunch of variations and different color arrangements. You could have a ton of fun making shaders that would mimic some of these really cool effects. These glossy, shiny beetles with crazy colors and reflections, and look how cool this guy's stripes are, right? There's just a ton of inspiration out there, and the beetles are a cool place to look. But that guy, yuck. Throw some basic lighting on this dude. Get some test renderings done. Gosh, there's almost too many cool beetles to look at them. Sort of having a tough time deciding which direction exactly to take this in. Maybe we should just make a couple. Let's see, and that is the beauty of digital art right there. We can try all the variations we desire. Looking pretty cool. So now using like the same basic shapes, we've created three variations here that feel fairly different. And then when we get into texturing, I think they're going to feel entirely different. So let's start getting into that next. Looks like the YouTube chat has been down. I wonder if there's people actually chatting. Oh, not really. Okay, cool. So you can see we're really starting, we've altered some of the body shapes to get a little bit of variation in these three beetles. But you can see when we start adding different materials, it takes it really even further in terms of differentiating them and creating additional interest and variation. So it's actually pretty fun. I love these like crazy bright green colors you can get with these beetles. It's really no shortage of amazing, beautiful stuff to draw from. What's this third guy gonna look like? This fella is a little bit like a ladybug, perhaps. Black and red. Of course, I'm not trying on any of these to be too realistic. Ooh, this guy's really cool. Yeah, maybe we should do some sort of yellow and gray. Let's do that. Hey, Lennon. Thanks for coming back again. There's something weird with the chat or the streaming this week. The the chat's been fairly quiet, a lot more so than usual. That could just be luck or the way things happen to shake out this fine day. But I don't know. Looks like we got a little error earlier. Hopefully everything's streaming okay, but who knows? Gotten very few YouTube comments, which is typically where most of the activity is, but we shall see. What's interesting is, typically I work from one camera angle and treat the whole image as a single composition, but that's sort of not what we're doing today. We're really just kind of creating these little insect character designs. I think I can render them from a variety of angles. The overhead one looks really nice, but perhaps it makes sense to do a variety. Or maybe we can make like a little shadow box with pins in them that have little names of the beetle. That would be kind of cool. Whoa. Oh, hey there. Looks like the YouTube comments are working. Left hand, man. Thanks. I like the green one too. I think I'm leaning towards the green one and this brown and yellow one. I like the stripes. I think we need a little more detail on some of these guys. So what I'm going to do, let's see here. Wings. Since I'm about to start expanding things, I wanted to do a save as. So let's see. Yeah, the repeats are kind of strange, huh? Isn't that weird? Yeah, the YouTube account is the same as the Periscope account. It's DLGNCE. That's where I am pretty much on all social media. So yeah, check me out there. Hey Connor. I mean, overall tips. It depends what you're after, right? There's a lot of settings in a lot of settings in this rendering dialog box, right? So I mean, ambient occlusion and global illumination always add a lot of sort of quality to the image. Ambient occlusion adds some realistic shadowing, and uh, and the global illumination creates a more realistic light bounce, which fills in shadowy areas and makes them appear more realistically lit. But it depends on what you're after. You know what I mean? There's a lot of different approaches to setting up a scene. There's a lot of different ways you can light and render a scene, and I think a lot of it should depend on what you're after, the mood, the point of the piece. Certainly, you wanna you know optimize the setup for like sort of the power of your machine and how long you want to dedicate to rendering. So there's a ton of options. It's hard to just like say one specific tip. Is there Is there like sort of a specific is there something you're trying to learn? Is there something you're after specifically? You had a national competition for 3D animation. Interesting. Tell me more about that. Seems like if you're at a international competition, you might be pretty darn good, and maybe you could throw me some tips on clean renders. Hmm. I've never tried this before in terms of putting a layer onto an alpha channel. Doesn't really seem to be working so well. Wow. Chat's being really weird today. On my end, there are no repeats. I don't seem to see other people's comments. Yeah, I don't know. Wow. I'm just going to restart this chat again. Sorry if your comments are getting cut off, but some of those comments are getting quadrupled, which isn't a great look. Hmm. Hmm. Let's try this a different way. I don't think the layer is going to work, but I think if we go directly in, what I'm trying to do is get sort of that veiny effect that you always see in insect wings. I'm trying to do that by altering the alpha channel. Hmm. This is a bummer. Yeah, it seems to be some sort of issue with this chat client I'm using. Let me see if I can update that real quick. Yeah, looks like I have been missing a lot of these comments. So I'm going to keep this YouTube one open as well. Hey, Daryl, thanks for stopping by. I'm not sure if you're still hanging out, but appreciate it. And Danny Burton's back. What's up? Hello from Spain, eating ice cream. That's cool. That's a good thing to do. All right. Hmm. It's getting closer. Certainly not perfect. I think if I wanted to get that nailed in perfectly, I'd probably find an image of an insect wing or draw out the little veiny bits and map those in there a little more carefully. Yay, Periscope chat's working. I can see Glennon. What's happening? So, Connor, sorry, buddy. Other than ambient occlusion and global illumination, what could you do to make it just look truly real? Truly realistic renderings, honestly, are not what I do best, unfortunately. A lot of times I go for a more abstract, flat look. You can see that I've taken specularity off of most of these channels to give it sort of that flat, really kind of graphic look. So I'm super pleased that you're hanging out and watching us work today, but I have to be honest, if you're looking for tips on photorealistic renderings, I'm probably not your guy. Just being honest there. What are you working on? Let us know, what are you working on at this international competition? I'm intrigued. I don't think I've ever heard of international 3D art competitions. Um, Lennon, yes, I have. I have done a whole bunch of 3D animation. You actually see some of the samples on my website, and 2D a little bit, but not as much. I don't think I have any samples on the website of that stuff. You know what I think I'll do actually is make this look like one of those shadow boxes with insect samples in it. So I know you've seen those before, like in a science class where these little beetles are pinned into a board. Let's create that look. I first started out today, I thought I was just going to make one beetle, but he came together rather quickly. So since we usually go for an hour and a half, 2 hours, I figured, hey, let's keep going. Let's make three beetles. I could put them in a little tiny scene. Oops. Actually, since we've got them pinned, I think in most of the boards like the types I was referencing, the insects are actually like floating off the surface a little bit. So that'll probably give us a little bit more of an interesting shadowed effect. And then what we should also do, put little labels on them. Little tiny labels. And maybe you guys in the chat can help me come up with names for these beetles since they're fictional. Let's come up with different types of beetle names. Can you guys do that for me? Yeah, I mean, so Connor, it depends on what you're after. I know I keep answering the same question, but like, are you trying to make water? Because if you're trying to make, like, if you're trying to render a stone, then I would say use noises and bumps and displacements. If you're trying to render water, I would say use refraction and transparency and different blue colors. So it's I have no idea what you're working on, so it's really difficult to give you objective, actionable feedback on how to make it better. I could say make it red, make it more red, but if you're not working on a fire truck, that'd be terrible advice. Um, so this it's kind of like a ladybug, um, but it's not quite. And I'd love to give these guys fictional names. So maybe, let's see. Oops. Lava bug. I like that. Lava bug is perfect. I just think to show off more of the floating effects, I want to give these guys a little bit more of a dramatic angle to the lighting. I think it's going to throw further shadows, make it look a little better. Gives a little more height look, I think. I'm changing this over to a spotlight. I think that might be better for our shadowing. Sweet lava bugs. Yep. Well, Chris, I'm pretty sure you contributed to the naming of a critter in an earlier episode, and we've got two more names we need to apply to these guys. So we've got lava bug for this middle guy, which I think works really well. Do you have any thoughts on these other two fellows? Like a green shiner or a racing stripe beetle? Hey, Source. Snoop bug. Danny, which one's the Snoop bug, Danny? Last exam. Woohoo! Congrats, man. Yeah, I think that spotlight is working much better for the shadowing. I'm just going to even make it a little bit wider there. Just a little bit of a wider ray. Maybe this piece will be a little bit more interesting or successful if we're looking at the bug's front on. So I'm going to try rendering where we do that. I'm just going to duplicate this camera. And rotate it 180 degrees. Whoops. Of course, we'll have to adjust the placement of those labels if we decide that this angle works better. Yeah, thanks, Lennon. I get it. Thing is, earlier in the episode, the YouTube comments weren't coming through at all. There's been like an error or two in this chat client, but I'm just going to leave them both open for now. Hmm. Yeah, I think this way is a little bit more interesting. I like seeing those faces. There's a little bit more detail on that end of the bug. So, whoops. Cool. I mean, that goes to show you, like, you know, you have a certain idea about how a piece is going to be, and you know, you keep pushing it in one direction. You push it, you push it, you push it. But it's important to be honest with yourself about what's working and what's not. And you know, sometimes it's really helpful to just reevaluate. Sometimes you need to rotate the camera. Sometimes you need to get a totally different perspective. If an image isn't working, change it. You know. I'm not super blown away by this one. And like I said earlier in the episode, this isn't an example where we're starting with a fixed camera point and adding elements to create like a finished composition. This is more about creating a couple of interesting character designs and presenting them in a fairly straightforward fashion. So it's not as dynamic of an illustration as some of the work we do in other episodes. But I think this is an interesting case study in how to take some fairly basic shapes and arrange them into insect forms, and then copy and paste those shapes and create riffs and variations on a theme. Hieronymus. That's cool. Let's do it. Hieronymus. Um, Source, yeah. The the episode this week has just been modeling these insects. And have I ever tried something with bioluminescence? No, I haven't, but that's a really good idea. It would be cool to do like an underwater ocean scene, or you know, with little like floating jellyfish or something like that, or even like a field scene, like an evening scene, like a landscape with little lightning bugs flying around. That's a really cool idea. I'll keep that in mind. Cool, Hieronymus. Yeah, fireflies. Fireflies are dope. Yeah, caustics. That's an interesting idea, Chris. I I don't use caustics a ton, although I have in the past, and they create some really cool effects. So that might be something worth playing with. Although the other thing is that caustics and those sort of lighting effects are really intensive in terms of like computational effort. So that might bog the system down a little bit too much to do a nice live stream and keep the quality of that high. Um, so I'm looking for, what was your suggestion, Danny? Let's see, Snoop Bug. There it is. So that comment, for whatever reason, didn't show up in this chat client. So whatever. So weird. As soon as I change the text in that motext object, disappeared. Ugh. There we go. Cool. That's not the first time we've ran into that issue. Um, these motext objects act a little funny sometimes. So I'm not sure if you all tuned in last week, but if you did, I want to thank you. Last week was huge. It was the 50th episode. It was the first time we had introed with some music, which is a custom piece I had made by this great musician who goes by Zach. The link to his website and other work is below in the comments on the YouTube page. What we also did is we broke 500 views in record time. In less than 2 days, we'd broken 500 views, which is huge for me. It's the fastest I've ever gotten to 500 views. A lot of the episodes that we do don't even reach 500 views in total after several weeks or months. So to do that in just a day or two was huge. And the piece turned out great, and I feel like we're really building momentum and growing the community. And obviously couldn't do it alone. So I'm feeling grateful and really just pleased that people are tuning in to whatever extent that they are. And I think we're building a rhythm. We're getting into a good habit, and our practice is getting stronger. So it's definitely a good thing. Yeah. No, I feel like we're coming up on a good stopping place. We've been going for about an hour and 40 minutes. Just feeling pretty good. So I'm gonna, well, what I'm gonna do real quick first is I'm gonna see how the physical renderer treats us here. Sometimes it goes a little faster or a little better. Sometimes the quality's a little nicer when we do physical versus standard. Sometimes there's hardly a difference at all. So it's always interesting to try things side by side and see which looks best. To be honest, I'm not seeing a huge difference. In fact, I think the standard is a little nicer. The shadows are less noisy. I'm going to do that. I'm also going to make this a little larger. Let's say 1920, 1080. So let's knock out a rendering. We'll hop over to Photoshop for a quick retouch and call it an episode. What do you guys say? Did it change back to Shiner? What have I done? Huh. I'll change him back to Hieronymus. Good eye. Thanks for noticing that. Wonder how that happened. Let's see. It must have been when I hit undo a bunch of times. Hieronymus. I think I spelled that right. So I love this when the viewers and folks hanging out are keeping me honest, double checking my work. That's what I need all the time. All right, we have it. So today's episode went pretty quick. This time flies when you're having fun, huh? Snoop Bug, Lava Bug, and Hieronymus. Feeling it. This was a fun little exercise, different from a lot of the things we do, especially the last few weeks. This has been a real change of pace. We've been doing a lot of landscapes lately, so I wanted to mix it up and try some new things and work some different muscles and build some different skills. So, as always, it's been a blast. Thanks so much for stopping by. I really appreciate it. Episode 51. We're on the other side of 50 and continuing to climb that hill and make build momentum and build the community and improve our skills and continue that good fight. So if you enjoyed what you saw, please hit like, please subscribe, hit the bell icon for notifications, and until next time, we'll see you next week at 9 Pacific, 12 Eastern for another episode of The Practice. Till then, keep building good habits, keep on your practice, and we'll see you next week. Stuart saying goodbye. Thanks, y'all.